Welcome to Materials and Methods Matter. In this episode we will explore the different types of inks and the papers used for inking. It is important to know that there are two basic types of inks: dye-based inks and pigmented inks. Sometimes the pertinent information is provided on the packaging, such as dye-based ink, waterproof, pigmented-based ink, and other times it's not. Therefore, it is advisable to do some research on an ink prior to using it. This demonstration shows the significant difference between a dye and a pigment. On this side I have a blue dye, and on this side I have a blue pigment. When I add the dye to the water, it automatically, you can see it start to drop, and showing that it is in fact soluble in water. We take the pigment and drop it in, and it just sits there on top of the water. Even if I stir the pigment in to the water, it still sits on top. What we need is a binder to make this blue pigment mix into a solution. Most dyes are not light fast and will fade when exposed to light. A black dye-based ink is made from various colored dyes. In this piece over here was used with a dye-based ink, and this is used with a pigmented ink. After 2.5 months, we can already see that this side is turning brown, whereas the pigmented-based ink is made with carbon black, which is very light fast. It is important to note that not all colored pigmented inks are light fast, but dependent on the pigment used to make that color. This ink is a dye-based ink, and as you can see, as I pull the brush across it, it is soluble. The ink on my right is a pigmented India ink, and it is waterproof. But whether an ink is waterproof or not depends on the solution used in a dye-based ink or the binder used in a pigmented ink. Here are some examples. On the left we have dye-based inks, and on the right we have pigmented inks. Again, the waterproofness depends on the water solubility of the solution in the dye-based inks or the binder used to make the pigmented inks. For example, in the dye-based ink, this ink here is a water-based ink, therefore not waterproof. This here sample is an alcohol-based ink, so water does not dissolve it. Alcohol will, but not water. And then down here we have a gum arabic-based ink, which of course will re-wet. In our pigmented inks we have a shellac-based ink, so that's the binder to hold the pigment together, making it waterproof. We have acrylic-based inks, same thing, the acrylic is the binder and holds the pigment in suspension and makes it waterproof. But here we have a gum arabic based ink, which is pretty much a watercolor because it's gum arabic and pigment, and of course it is not waterproof because the gum arabic binder is not waterproof. Paper is an important part of the equation when working with inks. All papers have sizing which determines whether the paper is absorbent or not. It is highly recommended that you test your ink and inking tools on several different papers to determine which one works best for your application. Here's an example of absorbent paper and non-absorbent paper. In the non-absorbent paper, we can see the ghost image of the ink on the other side, but it did not come through. It only goes so far into the paper. Over here we have an absorbent paper, and of course we could see where the ink is starting to bleed through. Now this is an alcohol-based marker which bleeds through most papers because of the alcohol, but you could see the differences here on how an absorbent paper pulls the ink in. This will also cause your black ink and colors to look much more dull and not as bright or as saturated as you might want them. That's why it's important to test your papers. Here is a simple test that can be performed on paper to determine its absorbency using a fiber tip pen. I call it my dot test, and what I do is I put a dot on the paper. Just put the dot on there just for a few seconds, and then I'm going to put another dot next to it and hold the pen there for about 15 seconds. And then over here I'm going to put it on there and hold it for about 15 seconds. You can see the results. In this paper, there was no change in the size of the dot. What this means is the ink is being absorbed into the paper and then spreads out. Where on this side, it's sitting on top, which will give us a more intense line and a darker ink. For more information, you can download a PDF of your guide to evaluating paper for more information and techniques for evaluating papers with other mediums. Stay tuned for the next episode of Materials and Methods Matter, when we explore tools used for inking. Materials and Methods Matter was inspired by my book, Making Art, Materials and Techniques for Today's Artist. For more videos on Materials and Methods Matter, as well as lesson plans and other instructional videos, visit Thalo.com.